Hello everyone, welcome to the last Sunday of 2021 and episode 28 of Dwell On It. I hope everyone has been having an excellent December, holiday season, year, whatever, right? Like, all of the different ways that this time of year is acknowledged depending on demographic or interests. So I hope everyone's been having an excellent time. Either way, for anyone who may be a newcomer to Dwell On It, here's a really quick recap. Dwell On It is a series where I answer questions sent in a variety of forms of media, right? Whether it's from a personal question, right? Just from face to face, whether it could be by a DM, whether it could be by email, and so on. So if you've got questions you'd like to ask me about some lived experience from the point of view of a trans woman, you're more than welcome to send some my way, and I'll throw them in the grab bag. Grab bag, as I've mentioned, is more than enough with plenty of cards of those questions thrown in here, and they're drawn out randomly. Usually try to take about half an hour to answer not necessarily as many questions as possible, because I want to make sure that the questions are thorough. Then the system's just going to carry on as the grab bag continues to have things to draw out of. It's an excellent way to go ahead and share lived experience and perhaps answer some questions for people who are curious or who would just like to get a point of view that they might not be aware of. They maybe want to see if they've got similar points of view, and so on and so on and so on. Topics are pretty wide open. I'd like to consider myself relatively transparent, so have at her, right? And then whatever happens out of it happens. Some questions are serious, some questions are fun, some questions are not even trans-based. They could just be discussions about life, right, or interests. So feel free to ask if you just want to get, like I said, some insight from a trans woman. Okay, so let's get into this here and get this episode started and get this year ended. Have you taken any risks during your transition that paid off? Oh. And what's funny too is, like, I feel like I should remember writing these things down, but I totally don't. At least a question like this. And so this is a fun one. Have I taken any risks during my transition that paid off? I don't know if I've ever done anything that I would consider an overt risk, almost along the lines of, I don't know if I should do this because it could end up being worse. So risk possibly could be a pretty relative word, kind of depending on who's asking. For example, the closest thing I could think of to perhaps a risk, when I came out really abruptly. I've said numerous times in numerous places, so pardon me if you've heard this a little bit before already, but I entered trans healthcare in October of 2019, and I started HRT February 1st, 2020. I came out on my birthday on June 7th in 2020 with many factors related to it, but one of the biggest X factors being the global social crisis that was going on, and I felt I had a responsibility to essentially throw my hat in the ring to help advocate for equity, for the means against things like police brutality and patriarchy and so on. And that was very different compared to what people have known of me before. I came out, like I said, really abruptly, and a lot of the goal was to essentially shake the shoulders of people who thought that they knew Brad well enough to get them to see, like, oh shit, I've been saying things that I shouldn't have been saying. Many other elements with that too, but I feel I really put my neck on the line by doing something like that. And I really don't know what the risk reward would have been out of that. I didn't really measure the values out of doing that or not doing that, because the only thing that I knew was that it was important to do because it was the right thing. So I don't know how I can call that a risk, but to me that almost feels like it's the riskiest thing, because my battle plan essentially when it came to transitioning otherwise was to, and again, remember that COVID obviously changed a lot of things in principle anyway. Like, for all intents and purposes, I ended up transitioning on my couch, right? So, which was something I lucked out on, right, compared to many other stories of people transitioning. But otherwise, my battle plan before COVID decided to alter how we manage the world was to essentially just go through a day-to-day transition and just, you know, I've said it tongue-in-cheek before, but if I was going to be miserable, I may as well be authentically miserable. And there would have been just a period of time where people, whether it's in the workplace or people around me or whatever, they would have seen my transition happen on the fly. They might have not known exactly what's happening overtly because it's not an overnight thing, obviously, at least on like the physiological side. So like there would have been a moment of people being like, something seems off or whatever, but there would have essentially been a slow social transition for everyone else too. Like, again, that's kind of what I was expecting to happen, and I knew that I was just going to have to take the uncomfortable situation and just work with it. But then, as I mentioned, COVID changed things a lot just in that sense, and then with Floyd's murder, for example, that put me in a position of I have to do something, right? I have to be able to contribute and fight against inequality, and I can do what I can with what I'm able to do, what's in my wheelhouse. So if we want to call that a risk, cool. Now, did it pay off? I'd like to think that it did. Again, I don't really have tangible measures with that, but I do know that I've been passionate about advocacy. I do have a track record of successful advocacy and seeing meaningful change in a variety of places, whether it is getting organizations to operate with a more inclusive structure when it comes to sports organizations, creating visible trans policies, or updating their policies and programming to be trans inclusive, whether it's being part of national campaigns, being featured, right, for representing trans individuals and their participation in events, and so on and so on. My advocacy does come with results. So I would consider being abrupt, getting out there and being serious that things are broken and things must change, and this is how we start. Seeing results come from that is the closest thing that I can think of as risks during my transition that paid off. I put a little star beside that because I believe it was in last week's episode when I was talking about transition and what a period of time for transition is. My transition fundamentally ended when I got my birth certificate. Everything else is me living. Simply put, I didn't do anything during my transition to amplify this or that about me in terms of a feature or a characteristic. So I don't know. That's the best way that I can interpret that. It's more on a personal side versus a physical side. So I hope that answers that. I don't know if I was able to answer that question directly because I don't feel I did anything risky, because everything that I've done I felt were more things that must be done, not things that didn't need to be done, but hopefully the reward is worth it. Has your social life changed since you transitioned? Yes, absolutely. I've been ghosted by a bunch of people who've known me in a past life, and I've met some amazing people who have only known me since. And the people who have stuck with me from pre-transition life to today are, with no question, some of the most important people, not just in my life now, but in my life that I've ever had. My social life absolutely has a lot more clarity as to who's important. There's an easy way to go ahead and answer that. In a past life, a lot of my social life was spent trying to build a place of meaningfulness in the lives of others, because I knew that one day, someday, if I was going to accept my reality and transition, I wanted to make sure that I was that relevant and that important and that special to other people that they would look past what would be considered weird to them and still love me for me. After transitioning and seeing the radio silence from the people that I thought I needed to fill a social circle, to realize how much that actually wasn't relevant at all anyway, has certainly changed my perspective of people who are necessary in my phone book or not. My transition happened pretty much in the same pace as the way that COVID has affected our society as well. As I mentioned earlier, I started HRT February 1st, 2020, and in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, that's really close to when COVID started making things messy in terms of social interaction and things like lockdowns and whatever too. So I didn't have like a lot of physical social life during my the kind of like the intro period of my transition, because COVID took away all of that potential anyway. So a lot of it was with online life and whatever too. It's weird saying it like that, but you know what I mean, where the vast majority of any free time was literally exclusively spent on whether they're Zoom conferences or if you're on social media like Reddit or Twitter or whatever. Those are totally different elements to how life would be in a past life. My social life was playing sports all the time, or, you know, going out to sing karaoke, or going to, you know, a pub and just having, you know, wings and a beer or so on. So that's changed so much. So that is a huge star beside how my social life has adapted between then and now. But that still doesn't take away the fact of you can still communicate with people, and the choice for many to not respond to my reaching out speaks tons. But when I'm out, when I'm in a social environment, I'm so much more alive and vibrant. Not necessarily more approachable. I'm still very introverted, and I still very much have a like kind of a like an arm's reach type of thing. Like, okay, hang on, don't think I'm that cuddly. But I absolutely have radiance, I have bounce in my step, I have glow, I have happiness going wherever I go. I'm proud. And it feels like people who are with me are excited to be with me too. As in, I exist. I'm not just an accessory somewhere, you know, where I would just kind of stand behind the rest of the crowd or whatever. I feel very much more involved with the crowd now, whatever that may be. So that has absolutely changed, and I feel that doesn't necessarily have to do with me being a trans woman, but that has to do with me being in love with myself and allowing that aura to just exist now. Otherwise, right, when it came to playing sports, oddly enough, so let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was playing on, you know, up to 5 softball teams in a season because I love playing sports. And I'd be asked to spare all the time, or I'd be playing in playoff weekends and invited to tournaments and whatever. And then oddly enough, I got 0 invites right after I came out. I can't really put my finger on why. Probably because of COVID though. So I don't really want to say that because I transitioned that people didn't want me to play sports with them, because that'd be really weird and awkward. Especially since those were the words that never got said. So it must be COVID. Right? It's got to be COVID. So that's changed significantly, but I'm not losing sleep over it either, because all I have been doing since I came out, either I'm working out, or I'm working on advocacy. I've got more than enough things on my plate. Don't get me wrong, I love sports, and if I could play sports 24/7, I can and will. But in a past life, I was relying on sports not just for like my passion for playing sports in the first place, but that was my social connection. That was my way to feel like I was meaningful to somebody in some sort of way. Sure, I'd be having up days and down days when it comes to performance in sports in general, just like every other athlete out there. But I know that if people wanted me to play on their team, it's because I'm good at what I do and I'm reliable and blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to get that validation from participating in as many games on as many teams in as many ways as possible. So I get ghosted by a bunch of fellow athletes, right? All of the same people who would have included me in teams in a past life, which again, it must clearly be because of COVID policies and whatever, right? And so I respect the idea that people want to make sure that they know that the company that they keep when it comes to being safe. And by the way, right, when it comes to COVID, right, I just got my 3rd vaccine just the other day. So what I'm saying is that people probably just want to be with people that they're comfortable with, right? People who they know. It has nothing to do with being a trans athlete, for sure, right? What I've done is I've taken that energy. Anytime that I look in a past life and see things that I used to be afraid of. I used to be afraid of getting abandoned. I used to be afraid of getting ghosted. I used to be afraid of being lonely. I used to be afraid of being isolated. I used to be afraid of not being loved. And now I've taken all of that energy and I've turned it into either education, policy making, awareness, so that people don't have to deal with the same experience that I have. So that people don't have to go through 39 years of wondering if they have a place in life after they choose to be happy. So my social life has changed. Absolutely. And there's no question that it's changed for the better. As much as you can look at a lot of things on paper and feel like it fell a ton backwards, I have never been happier in my life. So let's take that for what it's worth. Where have you lived? Is there anywhere you would move to if you could? Born, bred, raised in Winnipeg my entire life, save for a tiny stint when I think it was 12 years old, 12 to pretty much 18, right? That I can't say I moved, right? I got dragged with the family to a small town just outside of Winnipeg. My high school years were spent just outside of Winnipeg, but as soon as I was able to move back to the city, I did. And I can't say it's because I've got a passion for Winnipeg. Again, let's remember, my younger self was clouded with trying to figure out my own life. I was so unenthusiastic about anything, including stuff like travel or other cities or whatever. I didn't care what existed anywhere else because I was miserable. So I just learned to cope with where I lived. When it comes to why do I continue to live in Winnipeg? Well, for starters, right? I don't have much money to move anyway, and I don't have any passion to go to any other place anyway. There's no place out there that is capturing my heart to scoot along. That said, I've been open-minded to moving to other cities if it involved something that would involve, let's say, a relationship or family or whatever. I wouldn't say no overtly, because if there's a reason why where she wants to live somewhere, or if she is living somewhere or whatever it may be, and things are right and it made sense, why not? And especially even nowadays, especially more so after COVID has made it very evident that things like work from home or work remotely are far more feasible than what would have been perceived in a past life. Things like job security and whatever are actually values that are essentially retained now too. I don't want to speak, too far ahead in that sense, but the reality is that part of moving would usually include things like, how do I secure a new job? And being a trans woman, looking for a new job isn't exactly high on the fun things to do list. So maintaining that job security is certainly a huge value when it comes to living anywhere. I've worked at the same place for about 10 and a half years now, right? So just things like that, like you don't just well, mind you, I guess you can, depending on who you are and what your background is, what you got in terms of education and just your own life values. Maybe you can just walk away from stuff like that. I can't. How do I say it? I like what I know and I know what I like, and I'm happy, and I have no reason to just up and scoot. So all of those things all kind of get put together when it comes to would I move anywhere because any reason, because anything. But to just strip away all of the technical things, like is there a place that I'm passionate to move to? Not really. Like I said, it's not necessarily the city or the country or whatever it may be. It would be the reason as to why to move wherever, right? And for me, reason starts with love. I would move somewhere if it was an important thing to do for a relationship or family or whatever it may be. Imagine the 1 or 5 thought experiment, but about the trans community. What's your pick? Why? Wow. Okay. This would be the trolley experiment. If people are wondering about what the 1 or 5 is, the trolley experiment of would you let a trolley run over 1 person to save 5, or run over 5 to save 1, but about the trans community, what's my pick? Okay, so I've never really thought about the trolley experiment before, to be completely honest. Are we asking about, like, who are the individuals that are part of the 1 or the 5? You know, are they nefarious? Are they beneficial to the community? Are they all net neutral, like in terms of what their benefit to the planet is? I would just let it stay the course. When it comes to thinking about when it comes to the trans community, trans people are special but not special, I think is a really good way to put it. I don't want to consider myself to be special or on a pillar or on a pedestal compared to anyone else. Do I deserve protections in terms of legal protection from bigotry and hate? Yes, absolutely. But do I deserve special privileges because I am not a cisgender heterosexual white man? No. So there's a big difference in terms of protection and privilege in that sense. But fundamentally, when I wake up, I'm a human being. I am a trans woman and I am a human being. Those are the things that I know. I don't want to consider myself to be higher or lower than anyone else out there, and I don't consider anyone else to be higher or lower either. I do acknowledge that marginalized individuals have all the right to the appropriate protections to make sure that they are treated with equity, so that there isn't that idea when it comes to something like the trolley problem where the default would go to 5 from a bigot. Because of course any bigot would automatically choose 5. I'm perceiving the thought experiment like this. I happen to walk into the situation. I have nothing to do with how it gets set up or organized or whatever. I don't know enough about any of those individuals to validate who's more important than who, because that one person could be an advocate doing progressive things, creating systemic change, fighting for many benefits, while those 5 people up front could appear to be in the same sort of network. However, that they're bleeding lateral violence and they're doing things that are actually quite socially regressive in terms of just their human relations skills, or manipulating systems so that they're gaining attention in very unjust ways, or whatever it may be. But I don't know enough about those individuals, and I'm not going to get too deep into this thought experiment about give me the qualifying values for each person and then let me create a metric on it, because that's not part of the question. So when it comes to 1 versus 5, they're net neutral when it's all said and done from my perspective walking into the situation. Fate, I guess in some way or another, plopped them onto the tracks. Something that was not in my control, and that fate created how things are looking. Now, fate, of course, is an individual somewhere, but even then, that individual, there might be a plot purpose that I'm not aware of. They might know something more about these individuals that are valid, right? You see where I'm going when it comes to that thought experiment? That there are a lot of factors that I don't know to be able to create a decision, and I'm not gonna just look at things like 1 is more significant than 5 and vice versa. So without knowing all of the most intimate details in terms of what created this situation, I would let time just take its course. I would leave it in whatever situation it currently is. If the tracks are currently oriented towards the 5, then that's what happens. If the tracks are currently oriented towards the 1, then that's what happens. Ideally, what I would be spending most of my time doing is not trying to figure out which one, but I'd be trying to figure out, how do I go ahead and solve this, right? How do I go ahead and remove 6 from the tracks? That would be my approach. How do I go ahead and have it so that nobody gets hurt? Because there's got to be a way to figure it out, because, like, let's put it this way. Every lock can be broken, right? Every knot can get untied, and so on and so on and so on. So, I'm less concerned about changing the path of the track, and I'm more concerned about how do I just go ahead and get people off of the tracks. Like I said, there are far too many little details that without knowing what created the situation, it's not my position to go ahead and upend things, because there must be a reason for it. So I would try to halt the trolley or like cut the ropes or undo the knots or whatever it would be. And I would certainly take notes, because I'm sure that the authorities would want to know that something nefarious is happening. So, okay, I'll just take mental pictures of the scenery while we go at it. We'll collection of names and so on. Hey, just in case I need to know your name later, can I have it? And for the record, I also am that type of person who would do it with a lot of patience. I'm not a panicker in those types of situations. So that thought experiment would be me spending most of my time, how do I make sure this experiment actually doesn't happen? It has nothing to do if they're a trans individual or not. It's not like I would look at 5 trans individuals tied up and 1 cis person and then run over the 1 cis person. To sum it up, I would do nothing to change its creation, but I would do everything that I had in my power to stop it from happening. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because that's kind of where I'm imagining this. I've never thought about that thought experiment before. Really wild one. Really appreciate that getting thrown in there. I like having just something to, think about. And that really is something to think about. That's it. That's half hour. I'm going to wrap up. I really liked this series of questions. That was super fun. Thank you for taking a look at this episode of Dwell On It. As I mentioned at the top, please feel free to, whether it's email or DM or tap me on the shoulder or whatever it may be, if you've got questions that you'd just like to get an idea of some lived experience, please feel free to ask. If you'd like to help contribute with Higher Weller, again, email, DM, tap me on the shoulder. Always looking for more individuals, whether it comes to social media visibility, when it comes to any editing for videos like this, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to this and that and the other thing. There are so many hats that I'm more than happy to share with people who want to use their energy and help advance systemic change against systemic oppression. That is one of the major goals of Higher Weller, and if you agree with that and you want to help use your assets to see that change through, please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, please like, share, subscribe. This is going to get posted on the Higher Weller Instagram, as I'm sure we all know already. It's going to be on my YouTube. I believe the Instagram actually throws it over to Facebook as well, so there are many mediums, so feel free to also give those some boosts and share those to your networks too. And I'm trying to think of any other meaningful outro stuff, because I'm trying to advance that as well. There are a lot of hats to wear lately. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your Sunday. Have a great rest of your 2021. Happy New Year for everyone who celebrates New Year's. And just be safe, have fun. We will talk to you next Sunday, and have a great night.